Week after week, we talk about things to do when you've been injured as a victim in an accident. But there are other ways to be a victim. And today we're going to talk about representation and compensation for those types of situations. Good morning, everybody. It's your accident and injury guy, Jobeth Bowers, here in my Elkton office. Today, we're twisting things a little bit. We oftentimes talk about accidents and injuries from those accidents and our representation and all of this different stuff to do. But occasionally, we get calls for other types of injuries and other types of situations in which you might become a victim. And our office does not directly handle those types of situations. In fact, most offices that are not like who we're here to talk about today don't handle that kind of stuff. But here in the state of Maryland, and this is something that it's not exclusive to Maryland, but the concept originated in Maryland, as far as I know, 40 some years ago. And Maryland is on the forefront of having an organization. They're a nonprofit, the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, who effectively is also a law firm, provides representation for those who have been victims of crimes or the families of people who have been victims of crimes. And the timing of today's episode coincides with a town hall, an absolutely free town hall that the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center is bringing here to Cecil County, to Cecil College, the Northeast campus. It's Tuesday, tomorrow night. And we're going to talk to the deputy director of the organization here in just a moment. And we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to put up a bunch of information about that town hall. It is free. It is open to the public. There's going to be a link, or there already is a link in the comments or the feed or wherever you're getting this to register and get a ticket. You can just show up. You don't need to have a ticket, but if you want to make sure that you have priority seating, get yourself a ticket using that link. Absolutely free. So I'm going to invite and welcome on Joanna, who is the deputy director of Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Good morning and welcome.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to get out here and share more about the crime victims with all of my watchers here and folks in Cecil County, although I suspect that people outside of Cecil County are going to see this as well. For anybody that fits into that category, we're specifically promoting Tuesday, tomorrow night's town hall that's in Northeast Maryland, but they're doing other town halls. So if you click that same link, you're going to see other town halls, or go to the Maryland Crime Victims website and learn more about the organization. So tell us, let's just start for anybody who has no clue what the organization is, what the organization does. Let's do the little elevator pitch for it.
All right. Yes. No, thank you. No, Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center has been around for 43 years. We represent crime victims all over the state of Maryland. We are in every county. We represent victims of all crimes, from, thefts to homicide victims. And so in homicide cases where the victim is no longer with us, we help their families. And so in that case, they are considered the victim representatives. And so also in cases where, children are the victims, or people who are not able to represent themselves, you can also have victim representatives. And we were started 43 years ago when Stephanie Roper was kidnapped, tortured, raped, and then murdered in Southern Maryland. And her parents, in that process, they were not informed about what was happening in the investigation. They were not informed about what was going on in the court case, nor were they allowed to watch the trial. And then finally, when the trial was done, they were not even allowed to give victim impact statements. And so their takeaway from that entire experience was that this should not happen to anybody else. And so they've devoted their lives to changing the laws in the state of Maryland and throughout the United States. And so they've been very impactful in creating laws for victims and on behalf of victims here in Maryland, and founding what was the Stephanie Roper Committee and Foundation, and is now the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, and then also helped pass federal statutes as well.
So since the town hall is going to talk more about the resources and the ways in which people can utilize the organization if they're in need, let's not talk that much about that today. Okay. The organization, you mentioned legislation. Obviously, the situation that you described 43 years ago with the Ropers has changed quite a bit over that time frame. What types of things? Let's talk about what Maryland crime victims, and we can or can't get into specifics, but obviously that landscape has changed tremendously over that time frame, largely because of the organization.
I think a great example is the victim impact statements, because when the Stephanie's case did go to trial, there was such a thing as victim impact statements, but there were a bunch of requirements. The prosecutor had to decide that they wanted to present a victim impact statement, and then the judge had to decide if they thought it would be appropriate to hear or not. And so very shortly after the trial, the first thing that the Ropers decided to do was that they wanted to have that law passed, that if a victim wanted to present a victim impact statement, that the court had to hear it. And so that was actually the very next legislative session they were able to get that passed. And so that was, I believe, legislative session of 1984. I believe they were able to get it passed. But in the 1990s, they started a push to get a constitutional amendment passed. They had been able to get quite a few statutes adopted between that time, but they said, hey, crime victims actually deserve to have rights under the Maryland Constitution as well. So in 1994, they were able to have a constitutional amendment that passed with 94% of the vote as well. It was passed. And so now Article 47 in the Maryland Constitutional gives crime victims rights. And it's the right to be notified about what's going on in a criminal case. It's the right to be heard both at a sentencing, but also the right to be heard when they're considering whether to release a defendant or to hold them in pretrial detention, that type of thing.
Which is obviously some important and some valuable stuff, because you're in that situation. We're dealing with something like that, kind of along those lines right now with here in Cecil County, because most people watching this, or if you are watching this, it's got to also be on your radar about the recent death with the 3-year-old toddler and the bail situation with one of the co-defendants. And obviously there's a situation where I know, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, nor do I know too many details, but the dots are being connected so that the family can be represented by your office and your organization. But there to date, as far as I know, at any of the original bond review and the subsequent one that happened earlier this week, they have not had any representation. It's just been the state's attorney pushing for, I think their most recent was to have the co-defendant held without bond. But to kind of clarify, Crime Victims provides a completely separate attorney to the victim or the family of the victim in any of these proceedings, correct?
That's correct, because the state's attorney, their job is to represent the state, and their job is to do justice as they determine it. And so they do not represent the victim directly, nor the victim's interests directly. So oftentimes those interests will coincide, but they do not always coincide. And so that's the help of having your own attorney as a victim, is that we can advocate for what you as the victim want, whether it does coincide with the state's attorney's position or not.
Which obviously, like you said, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I know that in most situations, the state's attorney, before negotiating deals, especially on higher profile cases, will run those things by the victim, but without the advocacy of someone like a representative from crime victims, the weight is really as much as, is this judge going to yell at me if they ask these people over here if I had input in this offer and then they say no. If the judge isn't one of those judges, and some are and some aren't, then it may completely go under the radar some of these times. So super important to make sure that there's actually representation there, parallel to what I do day to day. When we sue somebody involving an automobile accident, that defendant is represented by an attorney, but in reality, that attorney is really representing the interests of an insurance company, not so much the individual. On paper, they represent that individual, but the checks are signed by the insurance company. The ultimately, when the case resolves, the decision on whether or not to settle the case is not that individual that on paper is represented, but it is really the company. And I think that there's an important parallel here to where the state's attorney, like you said, is representing the government, whether it be the state's attorney here in Maryland, whether it be on a federal level or otherwise, it's definitely different. So making sure that you have a say in that, super important. Let's talk about, again, I don't want to steal anything from the town hall, but cost for representation. Just quick answer on that.
All of our services are free of charge to victims. We are grant funded, so all of our we get all of our cost covered by various grants that we receive from state and then through the state from federal government. So I think we receive 8 different grants that cover all of our services. So we do not charge our clients for our services.
And where does somebody go to look at your income qualification standards?
So we do not have any income qualifications either. There are 2 ways that you can sign up for our services. People can call us. So there's an 800 number, 877-VICTIM-1, or they can go online to our website, which is mdcrimevictims.org, and you can do an online intake form. And so either way, we do require that you do an income verification form, because some of our grants do require that, but we have other grants that do not, so that we can provide services to all victims that come to us.
Cool. I thought that was important to put out there, because there are a lot of programs that people think that, hey, I can't get that, because no, if you are a victim of a crime here in the state of Maryland, seek them out. If
That's
you
correct.
are, and again, in a situation, in the most unfortunate situations where there's a death and a family member, you're likely eligible for their services on behalf of that family member as well. The website, the phone number, both of those I'm going to make sure are in the description. So especially if you're seeing this on YouTube, those are going to be there. I'm going to flash this up. It's going to block us here for a moment here, but I want everybody to have the information specifically about the town hall. It's thin. It didn't block us completely. So this is 5 to 7, Tuesday evening, Cecil College in the conference center. All right. You don't need to scan that QR code. If you go to the description, the link to where that QR code goes, where you can get details, information, more than what's here. The website's also on this. And I'm assuming that phone number that's at the bottom, which is the 301 number, probably goes to the same place that the 800 number goes.
It does. It's just the local number.
Makes a lot of sense. So what people are going to be able to learn is a lot more than in the 15 minutes that we've been chatting here about the organization. Connect with resources, ask questions, get answers, things like that. I know it's kind of weird to have this and me and us speaking behind it, but I want to make sure that it's up here for everybody to have access to the information for as long as possible here. Again, the link will be in the description below, so don't hesitate to just click there. You'll grab a lot more information there. So other than that, any last thoughts? Really, the pitch here is get out here to the town hall, ask all your questions there. Any last thoughts before we send people on their way?
I just wanted to say we're going to have some of our local partners who are going to be at that town hall as well. So it will not just be Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. We're going to have local Cecil County partners there as well. So lots
wonderful.
of resources.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate your time. Super important to put this information out there. Again, the event is free. It's an open town hall explanation of not only what Maryland Crime Victims does, but introductions to other resources here in the county, and then a Q&A session. So if you have questions about a situation like this, come out, register ahead of time if you can. If not, just show up. It's open. All right, perfect. Thanks so much, everybody out there. Have a great week. Be well, be safe, and we will see you right here next week with another great topic. All right, have a great week.